Dennis Hopper changed the landscape of American cinema in 1969 with his motorcycle road trip movie Easy Rider. Made on a budget of $400,000, Easy Rider went on to make $60 million worldwide. Along with Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, Easy Rider is frequently cited as the film which kickstarted the new Hollywood era. Hopper's film speaks the language of the French New Wave and the cinema verite documentary. While Easy Rider may be best known now for what it represents in the history of cinema, the film itself exists as a cultural moment in which a piece of art was released at exactly the right time to make a statement about the society in which it takes place. Easy Rider is about the death of the hippie movement, the death of the 60s, and the squandering of the hopes and dreams of the summer of love. It's kind of shocking today how such a loosely plotted and unusual film could have become such a cultural touchstone for an entire generation. And that success seems to have also confused Dennis Hopper, whose next film, The Last Movie, was released to such failure that Hopper's entire career ended for about 10 years. Even though The Last Movie has achieved something of a cult status in the 50 years since its release, the film hung like an albatross around Hopper's neck for the rest of his career. With a budget of $1 million and complete creative control, the actor and director took a film crew and as many drugs as he could fit onto an airplane down to Peru to make a film so bizarre and experimental that Easy Rider appears totally commercial and safe by comparison. It's easy now to admire Hopper's integrity when it comes to his work as the director. Easy Rider isn't afraid to portray its characters as scumbags worthy of disdain, and the film's bleak ending certainly reflects the fearlessness of Hopper's writing. However, The Last Movie's artistic choices are even more difficult for audiences to understand. The editing of the film pays no attention to chronology or narrative, and many scenes throughout the film begin and end without much internal logic. The plot, in its most basic sense, follows a man named Kansas, played by Dennis Hopper, who works as a horse trainer and stuntman for westerns, moving to a Peruvian village which acts as a backdrop for American westerns. After an actor is killed by a stunt coordinated by Kansas, Kansas quits the movie business and stays in Peru long after the film industry has left the town behind. However, in the absence of film production, the citizens of the village lose their employment. So instead of moving away or creating a new industry, the people of the village use bamboo shoots to create fake camera equipment and start making their own movies. All of these aspects of the film are told out of order, and the immense drug use of the actors and crew of the film lead to some interesting and unorthodox creative choices. After its premiere, The Last Movie was basically abandoned and buried by Universal Pictures, and Dennis Hopper found himself out of the job for 10 years, at least in Hollywood. During this fallow period, Hopper left for European films. However, by 1980, Hopper had returned to American films with a small role in Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, and he accepted another small role in a film called Out of the Blue. In its original inception, Out of the Blue was a film about a troubled girl meeting with a psychiatrist. Hopper was hired as the girl's alcoholic father. However, when the original director left production and the movie was nearly shut down, Hopper stepped in to completely rewrite the screenplay and direct the film himself. What Hopper and the crew produced is one of the most confrontational and nihilistic American films I have ever seen. What was once conceived of as something of an uplifting coming-of-age story, in the hands of Dennis Hopper became a nightmare of American desperation. Linda Manz plays Cindy CeBe Barnes, a young teenager obsessed with punk music and Elvis Presley. At the time, the most prominent role of Manz's career was as Linda in Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. While Linda Manz was 19 during production, CeBe is portrayed as a girl of about 14 years old. The film begins with a flashback of CeBe and her father, truck driver Don, riding together in a big rig. Don is drinking behind the wheel, and while he and CeBe joke around with each other, he drives into a school bus full of students. After the prologue, the movie catches up with CeBe and her mother, Kathy, 5 years later. Don is about to be released from prison. Kathy is dating a man named Paul who runs a local diner, and CeBe spends much of her time away from supervision.
Subvert normality.
What normalities?
She repeats punk catchphrases without fully understanding them, listens obsessively to Heartbreak Hotel, and flirts with the promises of adult life. In nearly every scene, CeBe is the object of harassment from the adult men around her. At a bowling alley, her father's best friend, Charlie, behaves inappropriately with her, and then with her mother. CeBe obsesses over her father, who she wants love and approval from more than anything else. Hopper's direction here is much more straightforward than in Easy Rider and the last movie. It's possible the film takes fewer creative risks in terms of structure or editing because of the difficulty the last movie brought to Hopper's career. But that theory diminishes the enormous risks taken with the movie's screenplay. The world of Out of the Blue is dangerous to women, especially young women, and Hopper's film feels much more modern regarding gender dynamics than anything else being made, especially by men, during this period. CeBe's childhood has been stolen from her, and she must constantly defend herself from the violence of the people who are supposed to love her and keep her safe. The performance from Linda Manz is powerful and raw. Her dynamic screen presence is utterly mesmerizing. Her rage sizzles in every scene, but it remains a subdued portrayal of youth. Manz and Hopper wisely maintain a controlled fury in CeBe, a person who has endured unimaginable trauma and grief for most of her life. Hopper's script smartly avoids the typical cliches of a coming-of-age story. CeBe has no love interest, no adult to really confide in, and no great epiphany. Instead, the life we watch CeBe live is one made up mostly of mistakes and false bravado. The first draft plot device of the therapist lives on in this version of the film, but the therapist provides no insights nor clarity on CeBe's life. And, realistically, the therapist just stands as another adult man who disappoints her. Eventually, Don is released from prison. CeBe is excited at first, as Don's return may hint at a return to normalcy and order. Perhaps her mom will sober up, leave Paul, and the family can return to whatever they once were. But the trauma of Don's accident lingers, not only for the family, but for the entire town. At his welcome home party, a parent for one of the victims of the car accident confronts Don, giving CeBe a panic attack and forcing Don to continue living with his endless guilt. It becomes clear to CeBe pretty quickly that Don has his own demons, and he would rather drink himself to death than face any of them. When CeBe realizes she's had enough of her family, she ditches school and travels to the city. Even here, escaped from the claustrophobic violence of home, CeBe is targeted by predators, like a creepy taxi driver who takes her to his house. In fact, the only joyous moment in the entire film comes from CeBe's quick trip to a punk concert where the drummer allows her to play the final bars of their final song. It's a quick scene of bliss, followed again by tragedy as CeBe experiences another car accident. Out of the Blue is a series of tragedies which befall a young teenager who has no idea how to process what's happening to her. In the film's final act, Hopper's script enters a darkness which cannot be discussed on this medium, but rest assured that the film follows through with its intended tragic themes. Around the release of the film, Dennis Hopper claimed that Out of the Blue acts as a spiritual sequel to Easy Rider. While Easy Rider is about the self-destructive tendencies of a hippie lifestyle, Out of the Blue is about the children of that generation. What kind of legacy would the men of Easy Rider leave behind for their families? The selfish scumbags of Easy Rider, all grown up and with a family, continue their self-destruction. and they widen that destruction to swallow their entire families and communities with them. While Out of the Blue is a brilliant film featuring one of the best child performances in American cinema, the movie is understandably difficult to sell to audiences. Despite critical praise, Out of the Blue struggled to find an audience in its initial release. But with the help of actors Natasha Lyonne and Chloe Sevigny, the film received a restoration and re-release at the 2019 Venice Film Festival. You can now find the 4K and Blu-ray releases of this film at Severin Films. Out of the Blue is an angry, raw, and empathetic look at the complete destruction of a family at the hands of selfish men. And it feels so current that it could have just been made last year with similar effect.